Hello, everybody. Barnard virtually. I'm Christine Valenza Shin, class of '84, director for advising and programs here at Beyond Barnard, which is the reorganized, rebranded, and expanded career development. So welcome. I think today marks our halfway mark, and we are finally finishing up with sort of job documents part of this, the resume, the LinkedIn profile. But let me make sure who's out there and that you can hear me. So actually, we're going to start today with a little poll or questionnaire. I'm going to launch it now. It should pop up on your panel. So go ahead and pick the one of four options that is closest to describing the current state of your LinkedIn profile. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to vote. Okay, so at the moment, the good news is nobody's LinkedIn profile is non-existent. That's excellent. And the other good news is 30% of you feel like it's pretty good. Could tweak or update, but generally okay. 20% of you are looking for a major update or rethink, and half of you is there, but pretty incomplete in spots. So, all right, well, so that's good to know. And hopefully today's session, wherever you're at in terms of your profile, will give you some ideas to take it to the next step wherever you're starting from. I'm going to go ahead and the poll and get started. So today's topic is, in fact, your LinkedIn profile. We previously looked at resumes and cover letters, and you're probably tired of seeing this, so this will be the final time you see this statement, that together these three items are the tools you use to present yourself effectively throughout the job search process. The three of them go together hand in hand, and hopefully the work we did on the resume and the cover letter will inform some of what we're going to look at today about the profile. A few housekeeping things. Sorry, I'm going to go back because I forget some of you may be joining us for the first time, and if you are joining us for the first time, welcome. And just to let you know, you can ask questions as we go along in the question feature. Your I forget what they call it, dashboard, and I'll stop from time to time to answer them, or depending on timing, perhaps wait till the end to address them. Okay, so let's take a look at your LinkedIn profile. The reason I tackle it third is because it combines facets of both cover letters and resumes, at least the way we've been looking at them so far. It, generally speaking, is a supplement to your resume. It's possible there's employers out there who only ask for a profile, predominantly look at the LinkedIn profile, but still, all reports to the contrary, most places are still looking at resumes, using resumes as the starting point, and generally going to the LinkedIn profile second. This is in regards to if you're actively applying to a job that's been posted. On the other hand, an employer, or especially a recruiter or someone from HR or a manager who's beginning to gather names, may see your LinkedIn profile first. But in any case, it's a supplement to your resume. It can be longer than your resume. It certainly has more room for you to put your various qualifications and experiences. So, but again, you want to think of them as related but different items. So it's pretty common nowadays for employers, when they receive whoever is screening the resumes, generally will narrow down the large group of resumes they get to a smaller pile, and very often the second step after that initial look is to go to LinkedIn and find out more about you. And it's important to, one of the reasons why LinkedIn has become, and your profile has become increasingly important, is that not having a LinkedIn profile can be seen as lacking digital or social networking savvy. Doesn't sound like that applies to any of you, so we won't talk too much about that. And the other important part, and this is, I think, been steadily increasing over the last 2 to 3 years, is it allows you to be found by recruiters and hiring managers. So recruiters and headhunters are more active in some industries than others, and you probably know better than I whether your industry is one of them and how much you're being reached out to. And so if you are in an industry where headhunters, recruiters are, whether they're in-house or working outside of or working for an organization, if that's an important part, it's something to think about. And I'll mention at a few points as we go through some tips specifically from recruiters and headhunters, what they look for, how they use LinkedIn. And hiring managers is referring more to, in general, people who are looking for someone to join their team. And there's a fair amount of searching that goes on that way as well. It might not be as sophisticated as the techniques that recruiters use, but again, you want to be thinking about your profile in all of these terms, that anybody can be looking at it. It could be someone who's looking to their team. It could be somebody that's casting a wide net and looking for possible matches to a role that they've been asked to fill, or it could simply be people who you are connecting to in your network who are taking a look at your profile. So look, you're keeping the audience in mind. We're going to look at a couple different sections. I'm going to bounce back and forth a little bit between the PowerPoint slides and my profile on LinkedIn to demonstrate. So, but I'm going to do the first couple of slides first in general, then we'll hop over and see how that works there and go back and forth that way. So the headline and summary are in the section at the top of your LinkedIn profile. We'll take a look in a moment, but just a few general points about that. Your headline defaults to the title at your current or most recent job, as listed in your experience section. I'll show you that in a moment, but it can be edited. Not everyone realizes that you can change that, and in some cases should change the headline so that it reflects what you want it to reflect. Sometimes, obviously, if you are looking to stay in your same field and up, or you're doing a job search within that same sector, it makes the most sense to just keep the headline your current title. And there's some professions, law notably, where it's just what everybody does. Everybody just puts their current title, and doing anything different with the headline is outside the norm. But in plenty of places, people do edit their headline. And I particularly will work with people on using it to indicate a career shift or change. And an example of that could be if you want to move into an event planning role. Perhaps you've done some of that on a volunteer level, but you used to work in public relations. You could position yourself as experienced event planner with background in public relations. If you don't have a lot of experience as an event planner, but you still want to be one, you could put, instead of experienced, you could put professional event planner or skilled event planner with background in public relations. So you're giving a nod to your past experience, especially if it's somewhat related, could be attractive, but you're stepping forward with what you're looking for as opposed to what you're not looking for. And then often people, a lot of people have summaries, but a lot of people don't. And that's another area where I find when I work with individual alumni and when we work with our students, is a lot of it is working on that summary. And it's a really valuable piece of real estate. It's similar, one way of thinking of it is as the body paragraphs in your cover letter. It's an opportunity to talk about what makes you good at what you do and what skills and experiences you've got that are relevant to the type of work you're looking for. And it's also similar to the way a cover letter can frame or sort of introduce or give a filter through which to view your resume. You can use it on LinkedIn to frame how your experience section is viewed. And again, that can be very helpful if your experience is varied, if there's gaps, or if there's other potential red flags, perceived or real. So for instance, if you are shifting careers, which is often why someone comes to see me, or often why some of you are thinking about this job search, the first paragraph could be about the new field and what you've what experience you've had or what you're doing to prepare yourself or position yourself in that new field. And the second paragraph could be about your past work with a particular focus on transferable skills. Similarly, if you were looking to move up, if you're gearing up for a job search where you'll be looking to move maybe into a management position or a higher management position, you could make that first paragraph focused on anything you've been doing to prepare for that, your leadership qualities, the assignments and projects you've gotten recently, but you sort of put forward what you're looking for or what matches up with your next step. But don't hesitate. You also want to include past experiences, past accomplishments with a particular focus on what transfers. Okay, and then the experience section is similar to the experience section of your resume. However, LinkedIn at this juncture requires a single reverse chronological listing of your work experience. So you are required to put dates in as you fill in this section, and LinkedIn orders them chronologically. So unlike how we spoke about the resume, where you can do some creative rearranging, or creative in the sense of not trying to hide anything, but in trying to target your resume towards what you're applying to, we talked about creating a section that just focuses, for instance, on your event planning experience or your writing experience or your teaching experience, whatever it is you're focusing on, and then allows you to move down into a separate section some of your other experience that's less relevant to what you're applying to. LinkedIn doesn't allow that. It needs a single reverse chronological listing. So sometimes you have to be a little bit more creative about how you present things. And that can be a challenge. And that's something that I work with a lot on people, and we'll give you some ideas as we go through. You can either use bullets or paragraph style in your descriptions. I've got bullets in my resume, and I use more of a paragraph style in LinkedIn, not for any particular reason, maybe just to mix it up, but whatever seems most comfortable and helpful to you. And one way to deal with this challenge of the single reverse chronological listing is you can incorporate volunteer experience in with your work experience. There's a separate section on LinkedIn. I'll show you that in just a second. So if you want to separate out your volunteer experience because it's important but not directly relevant, but if you've got volunteer experience that is relevant to what you are wanting to do or what you're doing, or that fills in gaps in your experience, you certainly can incorporate that within this section as well. Okay, so I'm going to hop out of the PowerPoint for a moment and go to LinkedIn, and here's the homepage of LinkedIn. Let me take a quick look, see if there's any questions. Okay, so far no questions, great. So here's the homepage of LinkedIn, which has changed in recent years. They have this feed that probably looks similar to Facebook for those of you who are on Facebook. And so here's your homepage. I'm gonna come back to this next week when we talk about networking in general and how to use LinkedIn more fully. Today, we're just gonna focus on the profile. And the way you get to your profile is over here, and you click on it, and then it brings up your profile. So, and because it's my profile, the editing functions show, and that's part of what I'm gonna be looking at today, is how to edit various things. If I look at somebody else's profile, which if we've got time, we'll do a couple, it's presented somewhat differently than your own one, and of course without the blue pencils for editing. So this is the section I was talking about before. This is the, let me see what they're calling it these days. This is the intro, okay? And you've got your picture, you've got your name, you've got your headline. So this is the headline. And then when you first fill it out, this lets people know I'm in the greater New York City area, gives a little snapshot of this types of thing. This is where you can see someone's connections, you can see their contact info. If you're not connected to them, it usually just shows, if you're second degree or further out, it will just show the LinkedIn profile. But when you're a first degree connection with someone, unless they've chosen not to share it, usually their email pops up. So that's and actually, this brings up an important point. A lot of people will use their work. You could use your work email for your LinkedIn email, but generally speaking, you want to use a personal email that supersedes your current employment situation, so that, you know, any sort of networking activity, and often you want to match what's on your resume, and usually you wouldn't use a current work email on a resume because you want to carry on that correspondence, that job search correspondence elsewhere. So okay, so, and then this is the summary section that I was talking about. So actually, let me just say again, as I pointed out in the headline, this is my current title, and I'm good with that. I'm not looking to shift careers or go anywhere else at the moment. So what works for me is to have my current title, and that allows people to see what I'm currently doing, and I could be invited to speak on a panel or some other professional opportunity based on what I'm currently doing, as opposed to what I'm aspiring to. And this is the summary. So as with most of LinkedIn, there's the part that can be seen and then the part that they have to click on for more. So again, you need to think about your profile in terms of someone who's skimming through quickly and someone who's taking a little bit more time. So all of which is to say, think about what is going to be in those first 3 lines. What do you want to say right up front that's going to grab attention or focus people on what you want to focus? Okay, so my summary actually is in need of an update. You'll see in a minute when we look at my experience, there's actually been a lot of change over the last year here at Barnard, moving from career development to beyond Barnard, and my role has changed. And I spent some time this morning sort of fixing my titles and order and clarifying some things, but I didn't tackle my summary yet. But mine's a pretty good example of needing to frame what you'll see is pretty varied experience. So again, the first paragraph focuses in on what I do now, although it definitely needs an update. And then my second paragraph, I frame some of the things I've done in the past and try and identify a thread through it. So I talk about empowering women and make reference to the fact that I started out my career as a teacher and teacher educator. So my goal in this summary is to tell people what I'm currently doing, and then to use the second paragraph to say, as you scroll down my experience, you're going to see some different places and different roles, and here's how it all makes sense to me and hopefully to you. So, okay. So that's my summary. And then this is the little dashboard that's only going to show up for yourself. Well, it's not really part of your profile. It's not part of what other people see. So we'll skip down to experience. And so current title. And then I had a brief stint earlier this year as the interim executive director for alumni relations. And before that, I was in the office, basically where I am now. I'm physically in the same office, but the title and the structure of the office has changed. So this is going to capture the time I spent in the Office of Career Development. And so this is new. Some of you who haven't been on LinkedIn for a while, LinkedIn is doing this thing where if you've had different titles at the same place, that they're connecting them. When I first logged on to my profile, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and they had reordered it for me, they got a little confused by my profile because I've been at Barnard for a long time, but in a variety of roles. And so they linked whatever LinkedIn's formula, seemed a little confused by when I was working for the college and some of the subdivisions. And so I actually did have to spend a fair amount of time this morning sort of reordering it. And it was a little confusing, but I think I've got it in a somewhat logical progression. So yeah, but you can see the reverse, no matter what you put in. So let me just click the blue pencil. The things that are required, you have to put in a title, you have to put in a company, and you have to put in dates. I don't think you necessarily, I don't know if you have to put the month in anymore, but you have to put in, I think you could just put years, but you have to put in some dates. All right, that's anywhere where there's the blue asterisk, it's required. And I definitely need to add a description, but in my quick rearrangement this morning, I didn't have time to do that. So you can see that even a career development professional doesn't necessarily have her LinkedIn profile completely up to date and up to snuff. So if that's reassuring to people, hopefully it could be alarming, but either way, that's how things are at the moment. So, all right. And then again, you see they can click more. So, and if I add more information up here, it's going to drive some of the earlier things off, which probably isn't a bad thing. These two earlier stints, I mean, as I said, I'm in career development. I'm happy to be, that's my focus point. It's where I plan to stay. So if mostly what they see is my career development experience and some of these older things get bumped off when I add some real estate up here, that's fine. Okay. And then the other part of your experience is education. And, a few judgment calls in here. I have a certificate, not a graduate degree, but because it's got the career planning and development right in the title, I chose to put that under education as opposed to under certification. Barnard alum, which you know, and for fun, you don't have to put your high school, but I like to. It's sort of interesting, actually. People who've been to my high school pop up from time to time. So every once in a while, I check who from my high school, which is in New Hampshire, is here in New York. Always kind of interesting. Okay. And again, the editing function allows you. There's a lot more information I could put. I could put more of a description. I could put grades. I can put activities and societies. So there's definitely more room to fill things out if you would like. Okay. All right, so let me see, I think I've got a question. So what if you were between jobs working as a consultant with multiple clients? What do you put in company title fields? So people handle that differently. If you have a real or a working name, real as in you might have incorporated or gone through the legal process of naming a company, but you might also just be informally using your name or something else. So it could be Amy Consulting, or because Amy is asking this question. So you could put a name, an official or informal title to your consulting, and then other people call it, you can call it freelance or consulting. You can just give it any title in the company, and then same thing with the title. You could put out, if it's your own company, you could call yourself the CEO, or you could basically you can just call it what you want to call it, as long as it makes sense. And I'm happy to follow up with you and give you my impression. But it's also helpful to sort of look at other people's profiles and see how they're handling it, so you can get ideas from that. And what you can do is in your bullets, if you want to either name some of your clients or describe the type of work you're doing for people, you can fit it in that way. So, okay, all right. Is it possible to not include graduation dates for high school? I'm pretty sure that's true. Let's take a look. Okay. Yeah, it's not required, so you can leave your dates off. So we talked about that a little on the resume, but I think you can leave the dates off, and I believe you can leave dates off for really any of your education. I think, again, LinkedIn is following that trend where a lot of people do leave that information off in order to not put their age out there front and center. Am I available to do a review of our profiles? I feel like it's a representation of my past. Yeah, absolutely. So there'll be information at the end about setting up an appointment, and then when you sign up for the appointment or when you call in, just tell them that you would like to go over your LinkedIn profile. What's usually easiest, even if you were able to come in person, it's actually easiest if the easiest way to do a LinkedIn profile review is for us both to be at our desktops, taking, and talking over the phone. I just find that the easiest way to sort of walk somebody through. So, but definitely either just set up an appointment, or you can, if you have further questions about what's the best format or way to approach it, you can shoot me an email as well. Okay. And that brings up a good point. Here's the full question. Are you able to do a review of our profiles? I feel like it's a representation of my past, but not necessarily where I am going. And I'm a bit wishy-washy on where I'm going. And that's an important thing to think about. I mean, we've talked about, you know, where all of you are at in the process. Some of you are clear on what your next step is, and you're in the middle of a job search for just that. But others of you are thinking about what your focus is. And LinkedIn in particular, because you don't want to be changing it constantly and tweaking it in the same way that you could a resume, it's definitely good to do a little bit of that work on what it is you're looking for and what your focal point is. And if you have a couple of different possible focal points, how can you represent that without looking wishy-washy? So those are interesting questions, and I often will recommend that people do a little bit of work around that on career exploration, career focus before you start playing around with your, you know, and changing your resume and your LinkedIn profile. So in that case, you know, I'm happy to help with that part of the process as well. And when you sign up or call in for an appointment, talk about career exploration or career transition, and we can focus on that. Okay. And so then we have a question. My master's and MPhil is in depth. Oops, wait, sorry, I'm having trouble seeing that whole thing. My master's and MPhil is in depth psychology and religion. My current career search is not directly related to that area. Should I list my master's? That's an interesting question. I think the answer to that is yes, is no. You could leave that off depending on what you're applying to, and as long as you obviously have put documentation of the degrees you need for whatever you're applying to. So if you want to just go with your undergraduate or other, you know, additional education that's more focused on what you're doing, you could do that. It's hard to give a blanket yes or no, but I do believe you've got that option if you want to sort of steer people away from you know, some of your earlier focus, especially if it's something that's going to make you seem more expensive, which graduate degrees usually do in and of themselves. You know, people tend to command a higher salary for that, but if it's not what's being sought after, if it's not aligning with what you're looking for, then that could be problematic. So, okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead in the skills and look at the skills section and then bounce back to the PowerPoint. So the next section is called skills and endorsements. And this is the section that used to look like a little bar graph with people's photos who had endorsed you. We're going to focus more on the skills part than the endorsements. The endorsements came about a couple years ago, and nobody really likes them because all they really are is your contacts can vote. It's basically a way of voting and saying, hey, you know, so my former colleague, Rachel Sorelli, has endorsed me for career development. It just doesn't have a ton of meaning for potential employers or people in your network because, you know, what does that mean that Rachel endorses me? I mean, you know, it makes me happy that we were former colleagues and she thinks I'm good at what I do, but it doesn't carry a whole bunch of weight. Recommendations carry a whole bunch more weight. So LinkedIn is actually giving you the option to change, to get rid of that. Let me see where it is. Okay, sorry. So if you do, well, yeah, since I'm talking about endorsements, we'll finish that conversation. If you click on the blue pencil and then go down here to adjust endorsement settings. So right at the moment, I've sort of left it the way I've had it, which is I want to be endorsed, include me in endorsement suggestions, show me suggestions to endorse my connections. If I could probably get rid of this and not really worry about it. So, and I'd say most people aren't making a lot of use of this. So if you find it annoying or distracting, you certainly can click it. So let's see actually what happens. I think if I do that and then I refresh, I wonder if it's going to take Rachel away. I should have said at the outset that one thing, see, now Rachel's gone away. And so now people just see my skills without the endorsements cluttering it up. So again, it's your personal call if you like it or you're used to it or find it valuable in some way. But generally speaking, the endorsements are a feature that don't have a lot of traction with employers and people who are looking to hire you. So, but the skills section is very important. I took a webinar myself last year on how recruiters use LinkedIn, and this is one of the ways in which recruiters can search. They can search purely through this box looking for the specific skills they're looking for. So a couple of things. If you hit add a new skill, it allows you, all right, so I can add 20, so it sounds like you can have as many as 50 skills now, which is a lot, but again, if you think of it less as people scrolling through all your skills and more that you're going to show up in a search if a recruiter is looking for somebody who can do some very specific thing, it might be worth putting in that many, all right? So you can either choose from this menu, or if you start typing, so let's say I wanted to do resume review, certified professional resume, it'll make suggestions for me, or you can ignore the suggestions and just write what you want. Let's say I want to call myself a resume guru. So, you know, you can basically put your own wording, or it will make suggestions. All right. So I could add a lot more skills. Again, could be an area I could look through. I'm just seeing. Yeah. So, okay. So that's how you add new skills. But the other part that's really important in this section is that if you click the blue pencil, you can reorder your skills within a category, or choose up to 3 skills to feature in your top skills. So again, this LinkedIn did for me. I have to go back in and sort of think about this. So they decided that career development, career counseling, and program development were my top skills. And if I want to change that, I have to unclick one of them, and then I could make resume writing one, and then it pops up. So you sort of click the pins, but you can only have 3 in the top, so you kind of can play around with that. But then let's say I want to move resume writing and have it be number 1. You can click and drag on those little things there, and so now that would be the first thing. And so then if I save that, now the first thing people are going to see about me when they're scrolling through is that I am a resume writer, which isn't 100% accurate and not necessarily what I want to focus on, but that can be helpful. So I'm actually going to get rid of that. It's going to move it back, and I'm going to pick, what did I have before? We'll stick with career development. Okay. So you can get rid of things, obviously, with a little trash can. You can reorder them as I showed you, like this. Excuse me. And then you can add. All right. So that's how the skills section works. So you want to put some thought into it. What are the top 3 skills you want people to see as they're scrolling through? Okay. And then I mentioned the recommendations feature that carries more weight. So I haven't made a ton of use of this. I've had a couple people, my friend Rachel that I mentioned, wrote me a recommendation at one point, and Beth DeMel is an alumna that I worked with for over the course of a few months as she made a transition into a new job. So, so she was nice enough to write me a recommendation. The key thing for recommendations is that you do have edits. So you get sent it, and then you can unshow it or show it depending on what they wrote, or you could ask them for a revision if you want them to focus on something else. I think there's actually a typo in Rachel, so I could ask her to revise it if I wanted to be picky, but all right, so you can play around. And generally speaking, these carry a fair amount of weight. It's helpful to get, you know, you could aim for 1 or 2 from each position or each recent position. That can be helpful. And it can be people who supervised you, or it could be people who were colleagues, or it could even be someone whom you supervised, especially if you were, for instance, looking for a management position and you wanted to have someone attest to your skills in that field, in that role. That could be really helpful. And then you could also give recommendations. Nina's a Barnard alum who worked as an intern at the Athena Center when I first met her. So, okay. And then here, if you want to ask someone for a recommendation, you can, anybody who's on LinkedIn, you can ask them, and then So I'm just curious if I do this. Now I need to give, it needs to be somebody here. So let's say I wanted to ask my colleague Talia, who just left Barnard to go. So you can see how it gives you these options, and then you can hit that. Oops, I hope that didn't get sent to her. All right, good, recommendations, and good, and then accomplishments. All right, so I put my 2 additional certifications in here. This is funny. I just was showing this to somebody the other day to show how a project worked, and did testing 1, 2, 3. I tried to get rid of that this morning and it wouldn't let me. So, oh, there we go. So now I can get rid of it, and I can save. No, I don't need, oh, delete. Okay. I do want to delete that project. So, okay. So that's the accomplishment section. And in a minute, I'll pop up and look at some of the other options, because there's other things I haven't added. And then the final section is interests. And there's different categories for interests. So these are influencers that I am following, companies that I'm following, groups that I belong to, and schools. So right now I'm just following Barnard, but I could follow other schools as well. These are, the reason for filling in this section is it, again, fills out your profile a little bit more. It's not a bad place to think about if you do have a new interest, a new field. It's a way of showing that you are interested in that field, that you're making connections. And again, companies, for instance, can search through this. So for instance, if somebody from Forbes could say, hey, let's see who's following Forbes, and then do some searching within there. I would come up as a Forbes follower, and then depending on what else they were looking for, it might help bring me up in their job search, in their search function. So, right? Okay, and I'll talk a little bit more next week about some of those groups and how to participate in them. So I just want to scroll back up to here. This is how you add profile sections. So if you, for instance, don't have some of the things that I have, or you're looking to add something. So, okay, so my intro is complete, my background. All right, what I haven't put, I've got work experience in education. I did not separately list volunteer experience. So if I wanted to do that, you can click on that, and then I can add that. All right, and skills we just talked about. All right, I've got 23, and I'm allowed, what did it say, 27 more? So I think you get a total of 50. All right, accomplishments. So I have certifications, but I, at the moment, don't have any published work. I don't have any patents, but this is where you can add some specific coursework, projects, honors and awards, test scores, whatever seems relevant. You can do that. Okay. All right. And then, and actually, I'll just click on that so you can see. So if you wanted to do, for instance, coursework number, yeah. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. We no longer, oh, okay. And that brings up an important point, actually. We're going to talk about this at the end. But when you're making all of these changes, LinkedIn used to, you might remember the bad old days when LinkedIn, every time you made a change, would send a notice out to all of your connections. So your connections were constantly being bombarded. And like Facebook, LinkedIn has responded to complaints and has made a lot more of these opt-in rather than opt-out. So basically what this message is letting you know what changes are automatically shared with your network. Courses aren't, but you can learn what's shared by taking a look. This goes through the whole thing. So, okay. So yeah, and then there's other things. Actually, let me go back to my experience for a moment to show you how this works. If for instance, I come in later and do some editing here, it gives me the option to share with my network. So if I turn that on, once I hit save, then that's going to go out to my network, and people are going to see that Christine added a new position or added details to her position. Okay, so you can turn that off or on. Right, that's an important thing to know. All right. So I think that's most of the profile things. You've got add profile. Oh, that's interesting. when you're scrolling down, you can come up here to the right and add that as well. Okay, good. One thing I should say in general is LinkedIn is constantly adding things, adding features, changing features. So I'm on it pretty often, and I get surprised by new things they're doing. You can always, it's part of what keeps us in business. The two things that keep us in business vis-a-vis LinkedIn is it's still, even though they've tweaked it a lot, it's not the most intuitive site. And secondly, they make changes all the time without announcing them. So I try and keep abreast of it, but I'll be honest, if they do something new and I can't figure out how to navigate it, I Google it. There's some bloggers, there's a fair number of LinkedIn bloggers who track LinkedIn changes and give insight, and so those are often helpful, or often LinkedIn's own directions and FAQs come up. So you can do the same, you can Google, or you're welcome to talk it through with me as well. All right, so let's leave LinkedIn for a moment and go back to the PowerPoint and summarize a few things that we have been talking about. So skills section, I'm just going to scroll through quickly and see if missed it. Oh, see, I already need a correction. 50 skills. And just to reiterate, you can choose which 3 you want at the top, even though LinkedIn will choose it for you, but you can change it. All right. And if you want to add new skills, you click that tab. If you want to reorder things, you use the edit pencil. And then we talked a little bit about endorsements and adjusting endorsement settings. Actually, this would be a good time to see if there's any questions. Oh, interesting. I have no idea who the people are who are showing up on my LinkedIn profile. How did they get there? I don't know what you mean by that. Okay. I'm going to save a few of these specific questions for the end. Okay. But that's a good one. Please repeat. How do you reorder the top 3? You have to reorder the top 3. You have to unclick the little blue pins. So in other words, if you want to put one new thing in the top 3, you click the little blue pin next to the one that's up there, and then that moves it back down to its category, and then you can scroll down and pick something else to move up into the top 3. Okay, but I'll circle back to some of those specific questions in a moment. Okay, all right. Additional profile sections. This is just recapping what I was just showing you. Right, and some of those we just looked over those sections. Okay. All right, so let's sum up a few things and give you some final thoughts, and then do a little bit of practice if we have time. All right, so you do want to, I didn't mention this, but you do want to add a photo. LinkedIn has all sorts of stats that more people will look at your profile and will stay on your profile longer if you have a photo. So, and nowadays with, smartphone cameras and everything, it's not that hard to take a photo. I wouldn't necessarily do a selfie, because even the best selfies have that selfie look to them, but it would allow somebody, a friend or family member, to take a pretty decent photo of you. The key is you want it to be head and shoulders only, against some sort of neutral background. It certainly could be like, it could be a natural background, but nothing super hectic and patterned. Wood paneling is always great. A nicely a colored wall, an ivy covered wall, foliage, something that's, it can have plenty of color in the background, but it should be all one color and not super, super busy. The exception, of course, being if you are artistic or doing something very creative and you want your profile photo to reflect that. But you also could get a headshot taken. It's actually become very popular at conferences, and we've done it at a couple of our big events, to hire a photographer to do LinkedIn headshots. Sometimes it's for free or for a small fee. So keep an eye out as you're signing up for events and anything professionally related, sometimes there'll be free headshots there. And then I've had a few people who are very uncomfortable with how they look in photos, and it was worth it to them to spend some money on actually getting headshots done. You could do it through a sort of studio, or, you know, like in the mall. I don't know if the Sears photo thing still exists, or, you know, I know there's some sort of family owned or independently owned ones. So you could do that, or you could actually hire a, you know, individual photographer to do headshots if you're really uncomfortable and want the photograph to be really high quality. But it doesn't have to be. You can do a basic, simple one at home and then upload it. But it is important, so think about how to do that. Same advice, I'm sure, that was on the resume. When you want to be clear, concise, and direct, it's tempting sometimes because there is more space on LinkedIn, you know, to go on and on, but people are skimming. And of course, LinkedIn has built in some of that. You know, they only show the beginnings of each thing. So keep that in mind. Again, how do you start things, and what are people going to be able to see? So we talked a lot in cover letters and resumes about using keywords and phrases in your targeted cover letters, targeted resume versions. It's a little harder to do this in LinkedIn. You don't want to be tweaking constantly, but if you do see, if you're seeing in the job descriptions that you're applying to certain keywords and phrases repeated by multiple employers, or specific skills they're looking for that you possess, then think about how can you incorporate that into your profile. Again, without changing it constantly, but as you're updating and refreshing, if you notice something and you want to add it, you can go for that. Okay, and as I mentioned, think about taking advantage of the recommendations feature, you know, reaching out to people. Some people will say yes, some people will say no, but generally it can't hurt to ask. All right, and, you know, use those additional sections to give a fuller picture of yourself to prospective employers. So, okay. Some frequently asked questions. I don't think this is a major issue for anybody in this group, because it looked like, at least at the beginning, most of you have a profile, but there are some people who don't want to use LinkedIn or who are reluctant. I've had a young alum who was a former actress who had issues with a stalker, and so she had a very particular reason not to want to use LinkedIn as she moved out of acting and into a different industry. So, you know, sometimes people can have and some people have a social media reluctance in general. You don't have to use LinkedIn, but it's become widespread enough and widely accepted in a lot of professions, not every profession, that opting out could slow your job search. An alternative, if you have, you know, really don't want to be on LinkedIn, is to think about creating a web-based presence through a blog or your own website, so that you have something you can send people to see you online, and again, to have that sort of fuller picture of you online, but you can control that if it's just your own website. And so I've had a couple people do that, to just sort of create their own thing as an alternative to LinkedIn to manage that. And again, that stereotype of, if you don't have LinkedIn, that you're not tech savvy, having your own website is generally reassuring on that point. Okay. This, I probably should take this section out. I already talked about this, but what are endorsements? How should they be managed? Again, some people like these. Most employers, it doesn't have a lot of impact. So it may be that your best bet is to edit it out. But one thing, sometimes if you've got the feature on, sometimes people will endorse you for a skill you don't want to include in your profile, and you can suppress that or hide that. This is a question I get a lot, especially with job seekers. If I'm suddenly more active on LinkedIn, can that tip off my manager or colleagues that I'm job hunting? And that can be true. You know, depending on how active a user they are, they might, hey, you changed your picture and you fleshed out the jobs and added a course. It could raise suspicions. That's not a deal breaker in and of itself. One thing I recommend, especially if someone's really revamping their profile, is to keep your privacy settings on tight until you're ready, and to make use of this feature. Make sure you're not broadcasting everything. And there is a privacy settings menu under the Me menu at the top right of the page. So you can keep your privacy settings kind of tight while you're working on it, but then once you are ready to sort of go public and you are going to start networking more actively, job hunting more actively, then, you know, it's you have to weigh it, because on the one hand, it's better to be more open and to have more of your activity broadcast to potential employers and people you want to network with. So, but yeah, I think the key thing is just that you may get a question and you have to be prepared to answer that either honestly or to have a plausible sounding, oh yeah, I took a workshop and I wanted to, just reposition myself for other, for speaking opportunities and things like that. Just come up with another reason why you might be updating if you don't want to come clean that you're actively searching for a new opportunity. Okay. All right, so let's do a little practice, and I'll also then scroll down the things. So for those of you who can stick around for a few more minutes, let's either, and you can do this in the question section, either write yourself a new headline, and this is just a draft, all right? So, try it out, or write the first sentence of a news summary, all right? So try that out. See what you come up with. We'll share some of them. I won't share them by name if you don't want me to. And in the meantime, let me go back and look at some of the questions that I was asked. So, all right. Okay, how do we edit the interest section? All right, that's a good question. Let me hop over there and answer that. Let's see, the interests. So where are we? We're LinkedIn, and I'm not seeing an interest section. Where's the interest section? That's the other thing, is that yeah, LinkedIn, when they do roll out new things, they sometimes roll it out to some people and not all people. So I'm not actually seeing the interest section. So, oh, career interests. Let recruiters know you're open. Oh, is it up at the top here? Profile section. All right. Well, I'm not gonna. I'll follow up with you offline on that, because I'm not really completely clear on how that's working. Actually, let me keep that for a moment. Okay. Is there a total list of skills available to choose from? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think it would be huge, but I think that when you start typing, you'll get a lot of suggestions, and that should be able to. And the other thing is, as you look at other people's profiles, that also might prompt you with things that you could add for skills. So, so take a look at that. All right. There are faces of people also viewed. Oh. On my face page, there are faces of people also viewed. Can I delete those? Yeah, I'm not sure. All right. Yeah, Susie, you've got a lot of very specific questions. So we should definitely go through, we should set up an appointment to go through that particularly. I don't want to keep bouncing back and forth between the two. Is it okay to give suggested language to folks I asked to give me a recommendation? I think so, especially to, sometimes people are actually relieved to have that. And if it's someone you're close to and very comfortable, you could even draft it for them, or they might ask you to draft it for them. If it's less of a close relationship and you just want to direct them a little, you could find a more diplomatic way of saying, I know a lot of clients seem interested in my ability to X, Y, and Z, or my experience of this. Or if you're in an interview process, a lot of interviewers seem to be asking me about this. So if you could speak to that, that would be great. So it just kind of depends on how comfortable the relationship is, how direct you want to be about that. But you definitely can try and influence things. Oh, okay. So here's a headline. Community organizer and local elected official. I like that. It covers two different things. All right, new headline. Experienced executive with background in program, project, and change management. Ooh, nice. I like that. All right, so And that makes sense, actually. Let me see. Hold on. Experienced executive with background in program project. Yeah, so it's fairly open. You know, it shows that you have a management experience and that you've worked in these realms, and that sort of, it kind of opens things up. So I think that that could be really useful. All right, let's look at another one. Okay. Recommendations. I reach out via email to coordinate on these, and I offer to exchange them with us, helping each other focus on writing to our needs. Yeah, that's great. You don't, that brings up a good point. You don't necessarily want to communicate through LinkedIn. You can definitely use that feature. And I think you have to at the end once they agree to it, so that it's in the, you know, sort of right format and you're allowed to upload it. But yeah, you absolutely could reach out first. And that's a great thing to offer sort of trade, you know, like love to get your recommendation, happy to write one in return. So that's a great idea. Thanks for sharing that. All right, and then, okay. Anybody else want to take a stab at a headline? All right, so if you don't want to put that out here to the group, again, I'm happy to, you know, set up an appointment. It doesn't have to be super long to, you know, sort of consult on some of these specific things on your profile and help you work on those. Let me just bring up the PowerPoint in case we have some final points. Okay. So, and if you didn't want to practice here today, you can play around on your own. Couple of final thoughts. You know, making LinkedIn manageable. We're going to talk more about this next week in the context of the job search and networking and how to use it. But it can get a little overwhelming. You know, there's a lot of potential in LinkedIn. They're continually adding new things and new options and new opportunities, most of which can be greatly useful, but can get a little overwhelming when you log on. But just in terms of your profile, if you are in the middle of doing a revision or adding a new section or something, that's fine. But once you're satisfied with your profile, it should remain fairly stable. You don't want to be changing it all the time. Just because, I don't know, I've seen a few people kind of go down the rabbit hole with that, and, you know, emailing me over and over again, what about this, what about that? And I'm like, it's good, just stick with it, concentrate on the networking, concentrate on applying to jobs, and don't fuss too much. People can do the same thing with their resumes, get a little obsessive over this bullet and that bullet and the order, and you know, it's just, I have a much more sort of pragmatic approach to it, which is, what are you applying to, and what do we need to change in your resume or your LinkedIn profile to reflect that and help increase the chances of getting called in for that job or for that opportunity. Yeah, so you want to focus on the dynamic aspects of LinkedIn. We're going to talk about that more next week, but you know, what you really, once you've got your profile in a place you're comfortable with, you want to really focus on building your network, getting involved in groups or writing on your main page, using its really you know, great features that help you research companies and look for all sorts of hidden connections. And we'll talk about this again next week, but LinkedIn should be part of your job search and professional development routine. So if you are actively job searching, you should be on LinkedIn at least, if not more, as much as you are on job boards and you know, other places. It's truly integral in most industries to the job search and is going to have a payoff. And you know, I encourage people who are actively job seeking to have you know, just their little list of things they do every day on LinkedIn or every week. But even if you're not actively job searching, it's also good for professional development. I've mentioned a couple times, people can reach out to you for things other than jobs. We certainly use it to search for alumni who might be good on panels, or who, you know, we teach students how to search for alumni that they might want to connect to. So, you know, there's a lot of different reasons that people might reach out to you that might be, you know, beneficial to you or just enjoyable to you. So think about how to make that part of your routine, even if you're not actively looking for a job. What's coming up next? Oops. I keep doing that. I have the old list instead. So we do have 4 left. The planning and executing the job search I did at the beginning this time. So we've got networking coming up next week. You know, we'll talk a lot about LinkedIn, but also some in-person types of things. And then we'll look at interviewing, negotiating, and managing your ongoing professional development once you're in your new job. For those of you who asked about counseling appointments, you can make them online through Handshake, or you can give a call to the office to make the appointment. Least efficient way is to email me directly. I'm probably just going to say, I'm 99% sure to just say call the office or go to Handshake. Okay. But some of you have started following up with me. Others are encouraged to, but of course it's not required in any way. So, okay, let me just see if anything's come up. Okay. I'll see some of you next week, and have a good rest of the day. Thanks for participating.